R9 was Messi and Ronaldo together.
Ronaldo phenomenon. Even now, he's the kind of player in 20 years' time.
Rani che va, salta Ferran, il tiro, gol!
Cristiano, when we saw Hughes, we've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a lad with so much skill, so much personality to go with it, braveness.
Side, he's beaten the defence, he draws Valdez! Cristiano Ronaldo!
Ronaldo. R9,
The real Ronaldo.
The real one.
The real one?
Yeah, growing up. Yeah.
He's the goal.
How many Ronaldo did you know when you were growing up?
No, only one. What I'm saying is to call him the real Ronaldo.
Yeah, always.
Now when we've got Ronaldo
in the game,
tomorrow.
people will say the real one. Cristiano. Ronaldo is R9. Cristiano is Cristiano Ronaldo.
There's a debate in football that somehow never ends. You've seen it everywhere. TikTok edits, heated comments, podcasts, old school fans arguing with young ones. It's the same question every time. Ronaldo Nazário or Cristiano Ronaldo? R9 or CR7? But what's funny is, the more you listen to it, the more you realise that most people aren't even having the same argument. Some focus on talent, some focus on stats, some talk about their prime, others talking about longevity. So today I want to do something different. Instead of asking who's better, I want to break down why the debate is so misunderstood. Because once you understand that, the whole conversation suddenly makes sense. Let's start with the most overlooked part in this entire argument, and that's the context. And once you hear it, you'll understand how comparing these two players directly is a lot harder than you might think. Ronaldo Nazário arrived in a version of football that barely resembles the modern game. This was the mid-90s, where defenders were allowed to get away with almost everything. Tackles from behind weren't automatically red cards, the pitches weren't perfect, strikers didn't have 10 cameras protecting their ankles, and sports science? Honestly, it's nowhere near what players have access to today. Injuries like the ones R9 eventually suffered from were often career-ending, not just take a year out and return stronger, more like you'll never be the same player ever again. Now compare that to the football Cristiano Ronaldo relished in. By the time he reached Manchester United, football fans have already shifted into a more scientific era. Training was monitored, diet was personalised, recovery methods were far more advanced. The idea of playing until 38 at a high level wasn't common, but it was possible. And Cristiano didn't just benefit from that environment, he squeezed everything out of it. He pushed the boundaries of what a footballer could get out of his body. And this difference, these two completely different worlds, is the first reason the debate gets messy. R9 and CR7 didn't just play in two different eras, they played in different conditions, different cultures, and different types of football. One was surviving a jungle, the other one was dominating a laboratory. But it becomes even more complicated when you look at how people talk about R9's peak. And honestly, this is where the debate really explodes. Because R9's best years weren't just impressive, they were outrageous. They were the kind of performances that made world-class defenders look like they were trying to chase a ghost. At Barcelona, he scored 47 goals in one season, and half of them felt like solo missions. He would take the ball, turn, and suddenly he was gone. Defenders bounced off him, goalkeepers collapsed, and the crowd reacting like they were watching something impossible. And he did all of this at just 20 years old. Then you add the 1998 World Cup, where he dominated the entire tournament before that bizarre, still unexplained situation before the final. And then the comeback in 2002, where he returned from two career-threatening injuries and won the Golden Boot and the World Cup. That kind of arc doesn't just give you great stats, it creates a myth. This is the reason R9's peak completely shifts the debate. His best version is so high that fans almost ignore the rest of his career. They take a small window, 2 or 3 seasons, and put it side by side with Cristiano's entire 20-year output. And when you do that, of course the debate breaks down. One side argues peak, the other argues longevity. Neither one is wrong, they're just answering different questions. Meanwhile, Cristiano introduces a different kind of confusion. Because if R9's peak was all about a short burst of brilliance, Cristiano's career is about something we almost never see in football: consistency at the highest level for an absurd amount of time. Cristiano didn't just stay relevant, he stayed elite. He changed roles as he aged, but the output never stopped. From a winger full of stepovers, to a goal-scoring machine at Real Madrid, to an experienced striker later on. He adapted to every stage of his career, and at every time people thought he might slow down, he found a way to reinvent himself. And this leads us to one of the biggest problems in the entire conversation: the way people use stats. Cristiano's numbers are ridiculous. The goals, the Champions League records, the international tally, nobody touches them. If you look purely at the numbers, the debate ends quickly, but the numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't show the fact that R9 was operating in a completely different football environment. They don't show the effect of the multiple knee injuries in an era with limited recovery tools. They don't show how defenders were allowed to challenge strikers back then. On the other hand, highlights alone don't tell us the full story either. R9's clips make him look like the greatest footballer of all time, because visually he was unbelievable. But highlights ignore the fact that his career was inconsistent due to injuries, and they ignore the reality that maintaining a level for 20 years requires a different type of greatness. So you now get the situation where one side is arguing with stats and the other is arguing with the eye test, and both sides feel like they're winning, but they're not arguing with the same metric, so they're never going to agree. Another part people overlook is how differently these two players shaped football. R9 changed how strikers play. He was the blueprint for the modern explosive forward who combines technique, power and agility. He inspired a generation of players from Thierry Henry to Ibrahimovic to Mbappe. His impact was stylistic. Cristiano changed something else entirely. How players train, how they eat, how they recover, how they view longevity. He made professionalism in football the standard. He made discipline part of the brand. His influence isn't about just the playing style, it's also about the lifestyle. So again, you're comparing two different types of legacies, and depending on which one you value, you end up with a completely different answer. And then you have the myths. These are the parts of the debate that sound good, but fall apart the moment you unpack them. The idea that R9, if he never got injured, he'd automatically be the greatest ever. We don't know that. He had the talent, but longevity requires mentality, discipline and adaptation. The idea that Cristiano was carried by super teams, that ignores how many Champions League moments he delivered by himself. In the end, the misunderstanding comes from something very simple. People aren't debating one question, they're debating several questions without realizing it. What's more impressive? Peak or longevity? Style or statistics? Natural talent or professional discipline? Influence on the pitch or influence off it? Your answer depends on entirely what you value. R9 represents the highest level a striker has ever reached in a short burst. Cristiano represents the highest level a forward has ever sustained in a full career. Those two ideas can both be true. They don't cancel each other out. So maybe the debate isn't wrong. Maybe it's just incomplete. But once you understand the context, the peaks, the longevity, the influence and the myths, the whole thing becomes clear. The reason this debate never ends is because people are debating different definitions of greatness. And once you realize that, the conversation becomes a lot more interesting. Because the real question isn't who's better, it's what does greatness actually mean to you? When people say R9 had the higher peak, they're usually talking about a few highlight clips or a handful of games that they remember. But if we're being honest, that's not actually what peak is. A peak isn't just a moment. A peak is a period where you're the best player in the world over and over again. Not for months, but for years on end. And when you look at it in that way, R9's peak wasn't just short, it was kind of microscopic. One great season at Barcelona, a great stretch at Inter before the injuries, then the 2002 World Cup where he was playing smart, efficient football, but not the explosive monster from 96 to 98. That's incredible, but it's not a multi-year peak. Now look at Cristiano. From 2011 to 2018, he wasn't just good, he was putting up numbers and performances that we will never see again. Champions League top scorer almost every single year. 10, 12, 15 knockout goals in a single campaign, league titles, Ballon d'Ors, and doing this all while sharing an era with the greatest competition the sport has ever seen. Now if you define peak properly, not as just the best day of your life, but as the best era of your life, then Cristiano's peak dwarfs R9's easily. One lasted nearly a decade, the other lasted barely a season and a half. And this is where the debate shifts, because you're not comparing fireworks to fireworks, you're comparing a spark to a supernova. There's another angle that people almost never bring up, and honestly, this is where the debate gets one-sided pretty fast. Big game scalability. How does your game translate when the stakes are at its highest, when the opponent's elite, and when there's no space, no time, and no second chances? R9, for all his brilliance, doesn't actually have a big Champions League resume. No iconic knockout games, no legendary semi-finals, no finals where he defines the entire match. At club level in Europe, he was great, but never the deciding force. Part of that was injuries, part of that was timing, but part of it was just the reality. His game wasn't built for tight, controlled high-pressure football the way Cristiano's was. Cristiano thrived on it. He lived for it. The Atletico Madrid hat-trick, the Juventus comeback, the Bayern semi-final goals, the 17-goal Champions League season, still the record by the way, and the Real Madrid three-peat. These aren't highlights, these are eras, these are years where every time the biggest games came around, Cristiano was the one carrying the heaviest load. R9 never had that period at club level. And here's the part that really separates them. Scalability. Cristiano's game scaled everywhere. Different managers, different leagues, different systems, and the output barely changed. R9 had to be the focal point. He needed a team built around him for those devastating transitions. He needed space. Cristiano could operate in tight systems, possession systems, counter-attacks, crosses, half spaces. He adapted every time. This is why when you step back, you realize something simple but uncomfortable. R9 was a moment. Cristiano was a movement. One gave us a snapshot of brilliance, the other gave us a full resume. R9 is unforgettable, but Cristiano is undeniable. And that's the real difference. What really makes this debate fascinating isn't just how R9 and Cristiano played, it's the players they played against. Because the strength of your era defines the weight of your greatness. R9 faced brilliant individual defenders, guys like Maldini, Thuram, Cannavaro, Nesta, but football back then was something more than just beating the man in front of you. If you got past one defender, you were basically through on goal. Tactical shape wasn't rigid, pressing systems weren't coordinated, the game left more space for explosive, instinctive forwards. Cristiano dealt with a completely different kind of opponent. Not just great defenders, but great units. Simeone's Atletico, Pep's Barcelona, Conte's Juventus, Mourinho's Inter and Chelsea, Klopp's Dortmund, to Chelsea's PSG, Cristiano dominated in an era where defenses didn't rely on one superstar. They relied on 10 players moving in sync. And somehow, he still found goals, still found moments, still found a way to be the difference maker in football's more structured era. The quality of your rivals matter. R9 embarrassed defenders, Cristiano embarrassed entire systems, and that's a distinction people rarely consider. If you zoom out and look at the systems they played in, you start to realize how differently their careers were shaped. R9 thrived in transitional football. Give him space, give him grass to run into, and the game was over. Barcelona played a fast, vertical style that suited him. Inter relied heavily on counter-attacks where his acceleration destroyed defenders. He was the chaos weapon, the player who didn't fit the system but broke it with individual genius. Cristiano evolved into the system himself. At Manchester United, he worked under Ferguson, who built a team around fluid, fast, wide play. At Real Madrid, he was under Mourinho, Ancelotti and Zidane, 3 completely different tactical identities, and still delivered numbers no one would ever touch. Even at Juventus, where the system was rigid and slow, he still found 30 plus goals a season. R9 needed a system that created chaos. Cristiano created his own success inside systems built on order. You can drop Cristiano into almost any team from 2005 to 2020 and he'll guarantee output, and you can't say that about many forwards in football history, including R9. Another angle people rarely explore is the supporting cast. R9's Barcelona season was iconic, but the team wasn't built to dominate Europe the way modern super teams are. At Inter, he often carried the entire attack. Brazil gave him the world-class supporting pieces, but at club level, his environments were inconsistent. Cristiano's story is the opposite. At United, he grew inside a winning culture but didn't rely on it, because when the time came, he became the driving force. At Real Madrid, yes, he had elite teammates, but that cuts both ways. You can hide in a great team, or you can define it. Cristiano defined it. He was the reason those Champions League runs felt inevitable. But the most important part is this: Cristiano has proven he doesn't need perfect teammates. He just needs moments, and he manufactures them himself. R9 needed the game to flow in a certain way. Cristiano forced the game to bend towards his strengths, no matter the manager, system, or teammates.